Welcome to the Merseyside Pensioners Association podcast. This is our first programme and it's designed to keep Merseyside pensioners in touch. The MPA is no longer holding its weekly meetings, so we hope this regular podcast will be useful. The MPA is known as the memory box of the Labour movement on Merseyside. Our membership have a wealth of life experience. I'm Phil Maxwell and our first guest is the chair of the MPA, Julie Lyon-Taylor. Thanks for joining us, Julie. There will be some people listening to this who don't really know much about the Merseyside Pensioners Association. So could you tell us a little bit about the organisation?
Right, well, the Merseyside Pensioners Association is affiliated to the National Pensioners Convention, and that was founded by a great trade unionist called Jack Jones. And we very much operate in Jack Jones' tradition that we have to defend and fight for those in society that need support. So if, trade unions are out on strike, we will go and support them there. We are worried about our members at the present time being on their own and being told just to shut themselves away for 12 weeks. And, those sort of issues we will follow up. And the big issue that we've been following for a long time is that of the National Health Service and social care. So basically, we are a campaigning organisation. It says on our banner, campaigning for pensioners and all who follow after us. Because, of course, we're all part of families, we're part of society, and therefore we care about what happens to other generations than our own. So wherever there is a campaign meeting, wherever we need to fight for justice, for example, over the Shrewsbury prisoners, we are there backing up those campaigns. We see that as our role, not to crawl away inside our houses and not do or say anything, but to be out there in society fighting for everybody's benefit.
You can't meet at the moment, so is the MPA involved in any kind of activity?
It was with a very heavy heart that I was finally persuaded to suspend the meetings as chair, but I'm determined that we will keep something going. And right now, we're planning to have small meetings of committee members, those who are fit and able to come to, and we're going to review the situation, and we're looking at reaching out to them via things like this podcast. But we're looking at those who are not on social media, who do not have computers, do not have mobile phones, and we'll try and get something out through the post to them to tell them what is going on. And we want to keep contact. We're going to ask people to write in to their MPs, to write to councillors, and to really try and get something moving over what's going on, because obviously the government hasn't got a baldy clue what it is doing, and they've just ignored those that are poor and at the bottom of the heap, those with contracts that are appalling and means they're going to be left with nothing. They have been an afterthought, and someone's got to start fighting back for them. Social care has been radically underfunded, and it has been privatised to the point where literally millions of pounds of profit are being repatriated from this country into tax havens. And they've done that at the expense of those people who need social care and those people who work in social care, because their conditions are appalling, and we're as much concerned about the way the workers are treated as to those of us who need that help. Because the best way to give people help is to treat the people with dignity who are giving the help. And the whole thing about social care with us has been about dignity. Give people choice, give people dignity, give people a say, and, trying to find out what they want and how to keep people at home. A problem has been with cuts in things like day centres, meals on wheels, all those sort of things have left pensioners very, very isolated. And in the end, it's like, well, put them into care, and they have very little control or say what happens when they are in care. So that's a big campaign of ours, and we were in the process of planning a big street campaign in Church Street about it, when we were all ordered to stay in our houses.
So what do you think about the government response to this crisis?
I think it's been very shoddy and extreme. I think it really smacks of the arrogance of the British ruling class, that they know everything and they know how to do everything. They've ignored what's gone on in other countries. They've ignored the lessons that have been out there to see what works successfully. They've taken no notice of that. They've dithered around. They've ignored the poor. They've ignored the people on very bad contracts. People have to pay rent. They've suddenly realised people have to pay rent as well as mortgage. And it has been an appalling response. And really, if you think about it, telling people just to stay indoors, if you're a pensioner and you live on your own and you're now frightened to go out and you've been told to stay in for 12 weeks, you can get very depressed. And if you get very depressed as a pensioner, actually you're more likely to die. It is a really bad situation. Nothing has been thought through by them at all. And I just think we can't just sit back and be quiet. We have to find ways of getting a message across that we're not accepting it. And most of all, the way that the staff in the NHS are being treated, it just beggars belief. Why haven't they all been tested? Why haven't they got the equipment? Why haven't they got the correct protective clothing? And I've witnessed this when I've gone to hospital myself. I know what's happening because my daughter is a very highly skilled nurse. They haven't got the masks, they haven't got the protective clothing at all. She works in A&E right on the front line. That shows, I think, that they don't really either think things through and or just don't care at all. And with the commandeering, well, what they haven't done is they've begged the private sector to give us beds. We should have commandeered those beds from day one for people to use. And, of course, they won't do that. They're going around with a begging bowl. This is a time of crisis, and they really, really haven't stepped up to the plate. And I think it's because they've got this traditional arrogance of the British ruling class. Don't forget, he may think he's Joe Bokes and all this sort of thing. He isn't. He's part of the establishment. He's been educated at Eton. He's been educated at Oxbridge. And really, he has no conception of what life is like. And he just seems to think that we know better than everybody else.
Well, I believe Eton was closed down days ago.
Well, of course, we can't have the cream of the British ruling class passing out, can we? So, I mean, I just think the whole thing has just been ridiculous from start to finish. And, I mean, there are arguments about keeping schools open and closing schools. That is a serious debate to have about how that would work. But you don't just announce, well, we're going to close the schools on Friday, and then they're not thinking about children who are on free school meals. You're not thinking about children for whom the school is a bit of a godsend for them to go to. And then what's going to happen to children of key workers? And then thinking of pensioners, who is going to be looking after these children? It's going to be the pensioners. So I'm over 70. I will have to help with my grandchildren because my daughter's been told she's got to work from home. How you work from home with a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old, I've no idea. So we do have to step in. So apparently, according to the government, we're very vulnerable and we shouldn't step foot outside our doors.
Julie, it's been marvellous talking to you. Thanks for that. And I'm going to come back and speak to you because I'm sure people will want to be kept in touch with the MPA and its members. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And any time to get the message out that we're still around and we're still fighting. Thank you. Thank you, Phil.
Our next guest is MPA member and press officer Tony Rimmer. So, Tony, you're in Bootle, and I know that a lot of pensioners around you are self-isolating. Is there any assistance at all for them?
Yes, Bootle and Sefton Labour have come up with an initiative to try to give people who are self-isolating within the community some support. It all started on a WhatsApp conversation that was happening the other day.
Yeah.
And there was a suggestion that, the concerns obviously were if we've got people who are self-isolating, who are relying on food banks, for instance, or people who are lonely, have nobody to help them, what can we do? What can we do to help? So, as regards to pensioners, what we're doing within the Bootle membership and the Sefton membership is identifying those in that risk category as being over 70. And one of our counsellors is pulling a team together to get the phone numbers to actually give them a call to see if they're okay, and also to see if there's anything that we can do to help.
Brilliant.
So that's happening as we speak. I think that started this evening. So I don't know the outcome of that yet, but I think that's the initiative that we're following and trying to get in touch with the vulnerable age group over 70.
Okay. Are you self-isolating yourself?
I'm not, no. The only thing I'm self-isolating is because most of the meetings that I would likely be attending have been cancelled. So maybe it's time to take a bit of a back seat and recharge your batteries. But also, as I say, what we're trying to do is organise. And yesterday I was out picking up, Sunday and Monday I was out picking up parcels for the food bank for people who don't have transport but are willing to make donations. And I went round in the car and picked those parcels up and delivered them to the food bank yesterday.
Tony, what do you think about the government's response to the crisis so far?
I've got a very big problem with that, because I really can't stand watching Johnson when he speaks on the television. I tend now more to not listen to him, to switch him off, because I don't believe a word that the man is saying. And I'll pick up what's gone on from maybe the news reports and the news bulletins a little bit later on, or from conversations I'm having with people, or from posts on Facebook and Twitter. The government response, I think, has been very poor. Conversations I've been having with people about the way other parts of the world, and particularly mainland Europe, are dealing with things, and they've actually been closed down now for probably getting on 2 weeks. And it seems that from the reports that we're getting is they're bringing the thing under control in many parts of those areas, and the cases of the coronavirus have perhaps leveling off, or maybe even dropping in some areas. And I think perhaps some of those areas, particularly where the likes of holiday resorts, they're in that position of closing things down now, in the hope that they can deal with the problem, and to maybe as best as possible eliminate the problem in time for their holiday seasons, where their economies rely on those holiday areas in those countries rely on the tourists going there and spending their money. As for this performance over here, I really feel that some of our more vulnerable working people who are on 0 hours contracts, or the gig economy as it's referred to, I think they're perhaps in danger of never having a job to go back to when this is all resolved, because many of the companies that employ them probably won't be there either. But I can imagine that Johnson will do all he can to ensure that his Conservative supporters and companies and chief executives who support the Conservative Party and maybe make financial donations towards the Conservative Party, they're not going to lose out, that's for sure. I don't know what is expected of working mums and dads who can't afford to take time off work, if they are still lucky enough to be in employment, how they're going to cope with the children. And then it's relying on perhaps grandparents who probably are in the more vulnerable age group, perhaps looking after the children while the mums and dads are in work. But perhaps I think something needed to happen, but it needed to happen weeks ago. You hear a lot of kids getting an illness in a school. It's passed on from one to another. It goes around at the school, and those kids, probably could be coming infected and taking it home to their parents. and the whole coronavirus thing just spreads from there. So I think it's probably the right decision to close the schools, but I think he needs to make more provision for childcare and for where people can't at this stage take time off and afford to lose any pay, to compensate them, to give them some kind of compensation payment. But I mean, as regards to that, we've been battling for years with this universal credit thing, and the wait for universal credit of people applying for that, I really can't see any immediate or any thing that's going to happen up front where a payment will be made to vulnerable people.
Well, I know lots of people have already lost their jobs in the past few days, and you wonder, don't you? They have to find the rents, they have to pay bills. Where's that money going to come from?
Well, exactly. I mean, I hear suggestions that they're trying to safeguard people who are in rented accommodation to ensure that they are not evicted if they've not paid their rent. And I think there's maybe some pressure being put on the banks and building societies to allow some kind of mortgage holiday for people who maybe can't afford to pay their mortgage while this period's going on if they're losing income. I think the whole thing's just going to be chaos, and I think we've got the wrong government in power to deal with it, unfortunately.
Well, this is all reminiscent, isn't it, of 2008 when we had the last crash and the banks were bailed out, and we all ended up, working people, paying for it. What do you think's going to happen here?
I think it's going to be working people who are more affected by this. I mean, if anything, you see the reports of the stock markets crashing all around the world, and you get some speculators who want that to happen, and you'll get people with lots of money playing around with those stock markets and earning a lot more money. When this is all resolved, they'll come out of this with even more profits and more value in their stocks and shares.
Tony, you were one of the 47 councillors who stood up against Margaret Thatcher. Are there any lessons from your experience as one of those councillors that could be applied today?
The main lesson I think that we could take forward from our experience was a matter of unity. All of those 49 or 47 councillors, as we became known, were all united in what we actually wanted to do. We all, if you like, signed a pledge that we were not going to make cuts in jobs and services to compensate for the cuts that the Tories were making to council budgets. And we did everything that we could to get our message out there. And again, that meant going into the communities, going into all the different wards on a monthly, at least monthly, maybe 6 weeks, getting our leaflets out. And we produced a newspaper called Not the Liverpool Echo. And our message was very clear in that newspaper. And it basically, if the real Liverpool Echo was saying some untruths about us or distorting the truth, we were able to contradict that and get our message across. And clearly we did get the message across, because year after year we were getting elected and re-elected by the people of Liverpool. And if we had any demonstrations through the streets of Liverpool to demonstrate against Thatcher and the cuts that she was making to local government expenditure, we had 60,000 people marching behind us. There's the famous photograph from the balcony of Liverpool Town Hall looking down Castle Street towards the Victoria Monument, and it's wall to wall either side, the full length, full of people who were there to demonstrate their support for the Liverpool 47 and the action we were taking to stand up to the government.
So lessons to be learnt there then?
Well, lessons to be learnt for me are that we need to make sure that we get the Labour Party members. We need to make sure that we get Labour councillors and Labour MPs into the community to show that the Labour Party are there doing things within the community, as best as they can to the communities that are struggling with this current Conservative government and the cuts that they're making year after year to local government expenditure. We need to get into the communities, as we are with the food banks and the support we're trying to do to the vulnerable people during this time, and be seen that it's the Labour Party that are trying to help, and it's the socialist message that we're here to help despite the attacks and the savage cuts made by the Conservative government. Can I use this opportunity to perhaps give a couple of messages out there that if people are vulnerable in the community, I can give a couple of telephone numbers and an email address.
Do it, Tony. Yeah, go on.
Right, well, we've got a couple of phone numbers. One is for Dan Lewis, who's the Secretary of Bootle Constituency Labour Party. His number is 07718 171 823. That's 07718 171 823. That's Dan. And myself, Tony Rimmer, I'm the chair of Bootle constituency, and my number is 077 480 40464. That's 077 480 40464. So if there are any people who listen to this and they're feeling vulnerable and they think that we can be of any help, by all means give us a call or text us, and we'll do what we can to help. We also do have an email address, which it's a bit of a long-winded one, but I'll read it out, and it's all one word in lowercase, and it's community@Bootle Labour Constituency Labour Party.org.uk. I'll say that again: community@Bootle Constituency Labour Party.org.uk. So if anybody has any issues and they're hearing this and think we can be of any help, by all means give us a call.
Well, thanks to both Julie and Tony for their marvellous insights. I've got to agree with both of them about how we need to respond to this crisis. Like many of you, I'm self-isolating, and the other night there was a knock on the front door, and when my partner opened it, he saw our neighbour Carl standing a few metres away, pointing to a bag of groceries on the doorstep. The groceries were welcome, but what was more important was the thoughtful generosity of Carl. For certain, his solidarity eclipses 3 men standing behind lecterns in London, dithering, speaking down to us, and putting the interests of capital before the needs of the many. We now need an army of cars, and I suspect there are many men and women on Merseyside just like him. If you are a pensioner and you want to share your experiences, then email me with your telephone number at maxwellphotouk@yahoo.co.uk and I'll get back to you. On behalf of the MPA, this is Phil Maxwell saying goodbye for now.